The shocking thing is not that blood glucose drops when we're fasting, but that it can drop to below 70 milligrams per deciliter, which we've been trained to believe is a potential hypoglycemic emergency that needs treatment. Stay to the end where I'll show you what mine did during my first extended fast. I'm Jackie from reversingdiabetes.life, here to explain why your blood glucose can drop to so-called dangerous levels when you're not eating. And any other questions about my journey from fat, weak, and sick to trim, strong, and healthy, leave your question in a comment so I'll know what videos to make next. Before I get into this, I need to address people who are injecting insulin. Insulin lasts a certain time in the body. We have long-lasting ones that can last a day or even longer, and shorter-acting ones that may last as little as 3 to 6 hours. If your blood glucose has gone low and you have insulin still working in your body, you probably need to take some glucose to correct it, especially if it's still dropping. There's also a class of drugs called sulfonylurea drugs. I'll show the names of some of them on the screen, maybe even where I pointed. These are going to be the common ones. These work by causing your own pancreas to secrete more insulin. Just as with injectable insulin, these can still be working and producing insulin. And again, you probably need to take something. I always like to use Smarties or Sweet Tarts to raise blood glucose. If you're on any medication that can cause hypoglycemia, you need to work with your healthcare provider or diabetes educator very closely to reduce medication before significantly changing your diet. But for those of us who aren't on any medications that need adjustment, it is a very weird thing when starting a ketogenic diet or any fasting, whether intermittent or extended, to see our blood glucose going down below 70 milligrams per deciliter. Of course, we expect blood glucose to drop, that being a major motivator to do a low-carb diet or a fast in the first place. But that low? So we're again in for a bit of biochemistry lecture, but since I know I enjoy that much more than you do, I'll try to keep it short and simple. We eat for basically two reasons. First, to provide the building blocks our bodies are made of, like protein for building muscles and fats for building all our cell membranes, which are basically the skin of each cell. So the first reason we eat is for the components to build the machine that is our body. And second, we eat to provide energy to run that machine. Each cell within our bodies needs energy to do its thing, whether it's livering or braining or muscling or whatever kind of cell it is. And we can extract energy from many different parts of food, and the vast majority of the time on the standard American diet, or any Western diet really, we get most of our cellular energy from carbohydrates, which are chains of glucose. So, under ordinary circumstances, we need for our food to have provided a certain amount of glucose, or our bodies to have stored or have made enough glucose to run our cells. And we can know if we have enough by checking our blood glucose. Now, we type 2 diabetics are accustomed to having too much glucose available. And it's kind of a mind-blowing experience to suddenly have to worry about low blood glucose. And it can happen so fast. So, what's going on? Well, here's the thing. Glucose is not the only thing that can be used as fuel for the cells. When we eat very little carbohydrate, or nothing at all, our bodies burn fat for energy. And in the process of doing that, they do make a little tiny bit of glucose, but they make lots of ketones. Ketones are a certain kind of fuel that many cells can use for energy instead of glucose. In fact, many cells prefer ketones instead of glucose. If there's ketones available, they'll use those instead of glucose. This is going to sound off topic, but I promise it's not. If you're camping and you're planning to cook your burgers over a wood fire, but you can't find any dry wood, you can cook over a propane stove instead. You can use either wood or propane as fuel. And sometimes, like first thing in the morning, if you need coffee, which I certainly do, you want the propane stove anyway because it will get you to your coffee faster than starting a campfire. So you have an alternate fuel available besides wood, and in some circumstances it's even better than the wood you considered your main fuel. Now, on a Western diet, we don't have many ketones available. We're rarely in ketosis at all. So when they say we need our blood sugar to be at least 70, what they're really saying is that you don't have very much propane. So you really need to have plenty of wood on hand at all times. On what we call the standard American diet, our bodies run nearly entirely on glucose. So if we don't have enough, it's a problem. If blood glucose drops too much, we can end up with not enough energy to run our brains properly. You may have heard of situations in which someone was mistaken for drunk or drugged, but it turned out they just had low blood sugar. When our brains don't have enough energy, we can get awfully stupid, including too stupid to know what to do to fix the situation. When I was on insulin, I carried a card with my blood glucose meter that told me how many Smarties or sweet tarts to eat if my blood glucose was low, because I couldn't count on myself to be clever enough to figure it out at the time. But when we're in ketosis, we have an alternate fuel available. And to go back to our analogy, if you get lots of propane, you can rest assured that you can still cook your dinner, even if the wood supply is low. Our brains love ketones. It's their favorite fuel. They like it way better than glucose. In fact, when we go on a ketogenic diet or fast until our bodies are burning fat and producing ketones, one of the first things that people notice is that their minds are clearer, brain fog lifts, it's easier to read or do math or concentrate on any task that requires problem solving. Ketones seem to actually make us smarter. So if blood glucose is a little low and you're not on insulin or a sulfonylurea drug, so you can be pretty sure it won't keep dropping, it's not the emergency we've come to believe it is. How low is too low if you're in ketosis? After a year of doing this with a continuous glucose monitoring system, my trusty Libra, I've come to know that my blood glucose can run as low as 55 and I won't have any hypoglycemic symptoms. It especially runs rather low most nights, but I see low numbers even during the day. Given I haven't been on any diabetic medications for several months now, I'm pretty sure this is perfectly normal for me and okay. I told you I'd show you what happened during my first fast. Before I began, my blood glucose was usually over 200, often spiking over 300 on 100 units of insulin a day. I reduced to 30 units of only the long-acting basal insulin when I began my first fast. I didn't have my Libra system yet, so I was just using the finger poke type of blood glucose meter and just testing each morning. My first day, my blood glucose was 151, which I considered pretty good. On day 2, my blood glucose was 107, so better. On day 3, the same, 107. On day 4, close to the same. Not much difference. There's a lot of other information here about what happened to me, so I'll link to it below so you can read it. On day 5, my blood glucose began at 92, so a definite improvement. Day 6 was 81, which thrilled me. That's normal blood glucose. On day 7, I have a package here to show you how little glucose this is. I didn't eat 2 packages, but just 2 Smarties. Okay, I recently found these in a store, and they're called Smarties too. These are more like, they're way bigger, okay. You see? Can you see? These are more the size of what I would have called sweet tarts, but when I said I ate 2 Smarties, I meant 2 of these little teeny tiny pills. I call them pills because that's how I think of them. They're medicine. The reason I like Smarties or sweet tarts is because they're almost entirely pure glucose, so they raise your blood glucose very fast. The general recommendation is to take 15 grams of glucose whenever you're having a hypoglycemic episode. Over time, you'll figure out what's the smallest dose that you can take just enough to raise it. Because what you don't want to do is just eat a whole pile of glucose and go high, which defeats the whole purpose of the fast and of ketogenic dieting and everything. And you can be real precise, much more so than with something like a glass of orange juice, which is what they used to tell us. So that day, I just took 20 units instead of 30. On day 8, my fasting blood glucose was 68, so I didn't take Smarties, but did reduce my insulin further to 15 units. On day 9, my blood glucose was 59, so I panicked a bit again, and I ate a half roll of Smarties and tested a while later and saw it was at 80, so calmed down. And I didn't take any more insulin at all for the duration of the fast. On day 10, my blood glucose was 68 on no insulin at all. On day 11, my blood glucose was 88, and I wasn't sure why it was rising, so decided this was the last day I'd fast. So you're watching this and thinking, she can't really be talking about not eating for 11 days, can she? That's freaking nuts. Well, honestly, I did take in some calories. I drank coffee with heavy whipping cream, which is a lot of calories if you drink as much coffee as I do. I drank my electrolyte drink daily to ward off low potassium symptoms, and that has a few calories as well, my recipe. And I drank a cup of bone broth at dinner time when hungriest. Most days, once I even drank 2 cups. And I ground ice in a cheap snow cone machine and topped it with a stevia sweetened flavored syrup, as ice felt more like eating than water did. But yeah, I didn't eat for 11 days. And while there may be other reasons for thinking I'm crazy, and I make no claim to sanity here, the reality is that I was extremely desperate because I was extremely ill, dying really. I don't believe anyone has to fast that long to reverse diabetes, but I do believe fasting is necessary. Because honestly, years of low-carb dieting, while it slowed the progression of my diabetes, it didn't fix it. My diabetes is in remission. Yours can be too. If you have questions for me, you know what to do. Comment. Thanks.